2014, Tennessee China Network has grown into a statewide platform to educate and connect people in Tennessee that do business with China in order to boost Tennessee exports, attract Chinese investment, and create jobs right here in Tennessee. From Knoxville and Chattanooga to Nashville and Memphis, Tennessee China Network has held over 100 events and community engagements. We've educated over 2,500 people across the state and provided over 500 referrals since our organization's founding. We also provide some consulting and training services as well. I want to announce today that Tennessee China Network is now ready to move to our next stage of development. After 5.5 years, truly wonderful years, working with so many of you to build this organization. I am stepping down as executive director, and I'm excited to announce that our founding board member, Lulu Copeland of Chattanooga, has stepped up as executive director to lead the organization into its new phase. So I'm gonna introduce you to Lulu Copeland, our new executive director, and hopefully if we can get her sound to work, she will say hello to you before passing it along to our moderator. Lulu, can you hear me or can you talk? All right, well, I'm not sure this is gonna work out with Lulu being able to say hello, but I will go ahead and just read a bit of her bio to introduce you all, and then we'll move on to our moderation. So Lulu Lim Copeland is an independent economic and workforce development consultant. She was executive director of economic and workforce development at Chattanooga State Community College, with more than 20 years of experience in workforce development projects. Prior to joining Chattanooga State, Lulu served as adjunct faculty with the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga's School of Engineering and Computer Science, and was a design engineer and then manager of engineering and design and documentation at Olin Mills. Lulu is very active in Chattanooga area's engineering and business communities as well. She's involved with several different nonprofit organizations and as well as the Chattanooga Chinese community. Lulu's originally from Taipei, Taiwan. She immigrated to the US in 1971 and moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where she currently resides, after spending her early teen years in the Philippines. Her family origin is Fujian, China. And Lulu has a BS degree in mechanical engineering and an MS degree in engineering management, both from UT Chattanooga. So I really want to welcome Lulu to the helm of Tennessee China Network. And if we can get her sound working before the end of this event, we'll have her hop on with this and say a few words to you all. With that, I would like to pass it along to our moderator and facilitator team. We have next will be Dr. Kong at the Confucius Institute at University of Memphis, who will be introducing our panelists. Dr. Kong, I'd like to pass it to you.
Well, first, let me thank Elizabeth and Davin and Lulu, as well as Stephanie, actually put all this workshop together, and we are so delighted to have all of you join us, and especially we are very, very delighted and honored to have seven very distinguished panelists to be with us to maybe give us some inside information about the local impacts from this COVID-19. My name is Hsiang. I'm the professor of geography at the University of Memphis in Earth Science Department, and I'm also the director of Confucius Institute and East Asian Studies. And so I would like to also let you know, besides myself as a moderator, we have Devin Buford also serve as a moderator, just as because he knows all the panelists much better than I do. And so today we have 7 panelists. Dr. Colleen Jonsson, she is a professor and also the Chair of Excellence in Virology and Director of Regional Biocontainment Laboratory at UT Health Science Center. And in the business sectors, we have Jalona Falkner, and she's the owner of the China Connection. And then we have Dwight Nordstrom. He's the chairman of PRI Management and Consulting. And in the logistics sections, we have Bob Wilson, who is the CEO of H.Saga International and Port Alliance Logistics. And also, we have Corey Ransom, who is the CEO of International Maritime Security Associate. And also, we have Davey Underwood. He's a SVP, Senior Vice President of Logistics Operations, Donovan Logistics Group. And the last but not the least is the economic sectors, Jerry Lauren, who is the Chief Investment Officer of First Horizon Bank. And I would like to also ask my another moderator actually give a few words about the speakers, and then we'll go on to the speakers. Thank you, Devin. Are you, Stephanie, you are the facilitator. Do you like to say something before we started?
Just we're excited to be a partner in this, and from on behalf of the Intermodal Freight Transportation Institute and the Herf College of Engineering, we're looking forward to discussion today.
Well, great. Thank you, Dr. Avi. So glad to have you to facilitate and provide all these wonderful facilities and high tech to our workshop and to this China network, so everybody get to know each other and also can get more information from this meeting this morning. Devin, are you actually available? You want to say a few words before we move to the first speaker?
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Cohn. Thank you, Dr. Ivy. Appreciate that and putting everything together, and definitely glad to be a partner as well. So I echo Dr. Ivy's comments on that. So we've got a group of panelists today that are going to speak through a couple of different aspects of what we're seeing in the market. So we'll hear a little bit about the medical profession and what's going on in the viral containment. We'll hear from some boots on the ground, a few companies that are engaged, all the way from small companies to large. Then we'll also hear from the logistics team and kind of what they're seeing from a few different aspects. We've got some great people there. And Jerry will bring us home and kind of give us an update on what's going on in the markets, what we've seen, some of it we're living and experiencing. That's why we're doing Q&A and the panel this morning instead of being in person. And then we'll close out with some questions. So let's kind of get started with Dr. Jonsson from UT Health Science Center. And so Dr. Jonsson, just give us a little bit of background about yourself, some of the antiviral work that you're doing in research, and go into what UT Health Science Center is doing for the COVID-19 situation.
Sure. So for the past 30 years, I've been engaged in research in virology, and my main emphasis of my study has been on emerging viruses such as this new coronavirus. I was engaged in the first coronavirus epidemic from the standpoint of what I'm about ready to tell you. And so this is the effort that we're engaged in right now in Memphis, which takes place at our regional biocontainment laboratory. This is a laboratory that's able to handle these types of pathogens. And this is important because this is where we qualify that different diagnostic tests can actually detect the virus. And so this is a very nice asset that the Tennessee has and the region has. And so we are, if you want to advance the slide. So I have a small staff, but a very highly trained staff. We're all Department of Justice cleared. And we basically provide services that act as a bridge between basic discovery into preclinical studies. And so I want to emphasize that our main purpose is emerging infectious diseases, avian flu, coronavirus. Those are the types of efforts that we study. And our main goal is to improve patient outcome through small animal models, discovery of therapeutics, or diagnostic tests. So in the next slide, very briefly. Yeah, there we go. So we are usually engaged in work on many pathogens. Right now, we have only work that is engaged on the SARS coronavirus number 2. And that is because we have this, safe at home in effect. So the only work we have ongoing is testing for various clients for the research. And so just to give you some background on coronaviruses, just very quick, this virus was, the first SARS virus was recognized back in 2000, 2003, and it had a very small impact in terms of outbreak, in terms of the number of people, but it had an enormous economic impact in the billions. We then saw another coronavirus emerge mainly in the Middle East, and that's had several both public health and economic impacts. One of the largest was in South Korea, I think 2 years ago. So what are we doing? We're engaged in a very large program now with Oak Ridge National Labs, St. Jude's, and University of Wisconsin to identify drugs that may be already approved that would treat coronavirus and hence accelerate the pipeline into phase 1 trials. But we may not find anything, and so we're engaged in development of small animal models. We're engaged in the discovery of new antivirals, and as I mentioned earlier, we're working with a lot of companies on new diagnostics and disinfectants. So that in a nutshell is what we do. If you go to the next slide, the 2 vaccines that are being discussed pretty much every day on the news are these 2. This is the update from March 26th. The WHO has a website that, there's a lot of websites around that review all of the various therapeutics, antivirals that are in trial. These are the 2 that are being touted right now, and one is being run by Moderna and NIH, and another is by CanSino Biological Institute and the Beijing Institute of Biotechnology. And so these are both in phase 1, which is basically a trial to ensure that the product itself has no toxic side effects before it's moved into phase 2, which is a bigger population. And then of course in phase 3 and 4, you actually can move into clinical subjects. So that's all I have to say in introducing what I do. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Jonsson, we definitely appreciate that and very timely information. It's good to know that the community is working on that, and I'm sure that that's not just a local effort and that there's a coordination of things across the globe. And so we're proud to have you guys as a part of Tennessee playing a role to help the world. So as we start moving through and starting to understand, okay, so what's been some impact to people in the marketplace? What are companies doing? What are they seeing? And so let's hear from Jalona Falkner, who's the owner of the China Network, the China Connection. She also has some retail companies that she manages herself, and she also shepherds a few other companies that are looking to expand their supply chain and procure from China as well. So Ms. Falkner, if you will, just give us a few tips about what you're doing, what you're seeing, and what the impact has been from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the introduction, Devin. Are you guys able to hear me? Thumbs up?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay, awesome. So as Devin said, I'm the owner of the China Connect, and we connect entrepreneurs to supply chains and factory direct pricing and options in China. And one of the biggest impacts that I'm seeing from my customer base, as well as some of the other solopreneurs that I work with, is that not only were they initially impacted by the extended Chinese New Year, they are now having their projects delayed because of the closures that we're experiencing here. So, for example, I interviewed for my podcast one of the owners of BK Naturals. She is they own a feminine care product, natural feminine care product line, and they source their bottles from China. And they had placed a big order right before the new year. However, they were not able to get new bottles to send out new products after the extended New Year. So they are now back in a position where they can restart operations. However, they had just closed the deal to have their products in Whole Foods, and that deal or the rollout of those products into Whole Foods is now postponed because of the COVID-19 crisis that we're going through. So just a real life example of the impact, the real-time impact to small businesses. And as you can imagine, they were not able to make sales initially when they had the shortage of bottles. Then now the income and revenue that they were depending on by having this unveiling and new revenue stream from Whole Foods is now impacted as well. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about today was just some of the resources, some of the many resources that are available to us as small business owners through the local government, state government, and just on a national level. Of course, you guys probably have heard as part of the $2 trillion stimulus package, several state resources have been funded to supply small business loans that are either no interest rate, very low interest rates, or they have a longer period of payback terms. One of those loans is through the SBA, low interest loans. For the state of Tennessee, they just funded, the Tennessee Department of Economic Commerce and Development has just released a long list of resources on their website that includes some grants, which are not, you have to repay, and then some other avenues to capture some of these low interest loans. Another resource that I want to share from a state perspective is the Launch Tennessee website, which supports small businesses and different types of startups. They have a very extensive resource page that gives workshops, like business continuity workshops. There was a workshop that was a couple of days ago that talked about leading your business through crisis. That was put on by the Council of Economic Development. So from Launch Tennessee, or it's actually launch.tn, you can hop in there, look at some of these on-demand workshops, get real-time feedback, advice, and just general best practices on how to navigate this very difficult time that we're experiencing. And then also Tennessee.gov has a ton of resources as well, like broadband resources, their approach to helping you from a business continuity planning perspective. And when we talk about national resources, I don't know if many of you have heard that Facebook actually has a grant process where they will be awarding up to $100 million for 30,000 small businesses. That's amazing, and they will start soon reviewing or allowing you to submit applications for those grants. Just think about that. 30,000 businesses across the U.S. can get grants up to, I think it's $10,000 through Facebook. I think that's amazing. Yelp has a $25 million relief fund for small businesses, although their focus is mostly restaurants and those in the food and beverage industry. And then there's another organization called the Small Business Relief Fund that's also providing up to $5,000 in grants, free money for your business. So there's a lot of resources and a lot of things out there that are available to us. One other type of resource I'd like to mention are the number of free tech resources that are being provided. If you are in need of cloud storage, or perhaps you need to scale back on the money that you're spending for small operational expenses. Perhaps your communications platform, like we're on Zoom today, there's another communications platform, Zoho, and actually another one called Jam, that are offering up to 6 months free usage of their highest level plans for communication and video. We also have Hootsuite, which is a social media platform to help you manage and consolidate all of your social media platforms. They're giving 3 months free of their paid plan. So we've put all of these amazing resources together for everyone on this call and any other small business owner that you may know. There's a COVID-19 business resource directory that we'll be releasing today through the China Connect. And in that resource directory will be links to all of these resources that I've mentioned today, as well as some other ones, even some wellness resources that may not have, a direct correlation to how your business can get through this crisis. But we all know that when you're healthy mentally and spiritually, you do your best work. So you'll have those resources as well. So that's all I wanted to share today. Thank you, Elizabeth, Devin, for coordinating this and having all of us together to talk through this difficult time.
Thank you, Jalona. We appreciate that. There's definitely some great resources there with Facebook putting out grants and with Yelp starting some relief funds and some other free tech resources. It's starting to make me think, should I go into business myself? So appreciate that.
Well, Devin, you have to have started your business by March 1st. So for most of those. So
hey, maybe we can partner. Okay.
Exactly. There you go.
Thank you so much. And I know we wanted to make sure that we've got a diverse perspective on everything that's going on and companies of all sizes. And so let's hear from Dwight Nordstrom. He's on the call today, and he's going to chime in. He's definitely got a unique set of experiences. From an equity perspective, he has investments, money to work, him and his family. He's got a long tenured career for about 20, 30 years and working with large corporates as well, GE Corporation. And so let's hear from Dwight. Dwight, give us a little bit of background about PR real quickly, and then give us some updates on what you're seeing.
Sure, and thank you for this. And again, our congratulations to Elizabeth for the fine work you've done in the startup, as well as now with the transition of leadership. We love Tennessee. We do have we've had 29 equity holdings, several thousand employees. Most of our businesses are wholly foreign owned. We are primarily in the manufacturing business, aerospace, medical parts. We're the largest shower door manufacturer for Home Depot and Lowe's, if you know Dreamline. And my wife has been a teacher at Beijing University with PhDs for many years. We've lived in China for the last 30 plus years, full time. Right now, though, my family, we were back here for Lunar New Year break, and our two girls, 15 and 12, their schools were closed down, and we said, well, we'll come back for a short while. And now we're on a sort of pause in Southern California until China gets relief a little bit. I was asked to speak about the restart of manufacturing, sourcing, engineering centers in China. And what I'll do is I'll look at our 9 existing holdings in China, and as well as I'm the chairman now of for 17 years of the American Chamber of Commerce China, the Manufacturing and Sourcing Forum. We have about 500 companies in that grouping. And I did want to refer you, if you go to amchamchina.org site, amchamchina.org, we just came out 2 days ago with a best practices, 20 best practices for companies operating with the COVID-19. China has been about 8 weeks plus or minus what's happening in the US. And so we have gone through complete shutdown, and I think those 20 best practices may be helpful. Elizabeth, I will send that to you afterwards as well if people can't get on the site or can't do it, but it's a nice a sort of practical survey what was done among companies operating. In general, what I want to say is that 90+% of our employees are back at work. It's over 1,000. Where we are having less than 90% would be at the engineering centers or office operations and our media group. And there we're in the 60 to 75% range, not because we couldn't be at 90%, but because of just to keep people apart from each other and able to work from home. Manufacturing, you cannot work from home. So China is back up and running in March. However, there are two things happening that I think you should be aware of. There was a pent-up supply chain that was able to meet some of the component parts. If you need 30 parts for what you're producing and you get 29 parts, well, you can't produce until you get all 30 parts. And right now, I would say our companies as well as others are suffering from supply chain challenges here at this last week of March versus the startup at the end of February. So there will be things in short supply. Clearly, be careful if you're buying medical masks from China. I will tell you there's a lot of fake things going on, and it's in the component part area where component parts are being done. This is off the record. FedEx obviously is based there. We ship masks to our China medical stent factory. We're the second largest there, about 200 people. And they made a wrong, here again, this was an out of the ordinary shipment from the US to China. We received products that frankly are illegal to be received in China. We didn't send them. It was a mistake on FedEx part. So when you're doing stuff sort of not out of the norm, be careful about quality. What we have found is there's a lot of advantages and learning that if you have more than one operation, you're just able to respond better. So here, being big versus small is a little bit better. We do have a consulting division. It's a small part of our total portfolio, but we have 30 people full-time there. And we've been able to receive Chinese government, the discussion was of the US government, but Chinese government grants for some of the normal Social Security payments for employees. Several of our operations have received discounts or complete, not having to pay rent for February and/or March. Also, there are some, like the US, you've got different states making different approaches. In China, different provinces and cities have taken very different approaches to what's allowed in, shipment issues, et cetera. And sometimes these are illogical sense. And so at a national level, if you've got presence in Beijing, we've been able to overcome for a local operation that may be stymied because of something that a local mayor just decided to do. There have been some cash incentives, logistics, air freight has gone up unbelievably in terms of cost. And of course, ocean freight is now cleared up. But I will say for the first 2 weeks after startup at the end of February, we had over 40 containers waiting on ports to be shipped. So that was an issue. Also, in your force majeure clauses, when you go to customers and say, I've been delayed, I think you need a common presence. And so if you're a small group, I encourage you to reach out to people and to understand what are some ways to communicate best practices. We're all learning here, but I think this is where sometimes the bigger companies are having more operations has been helpful. And I think, is there one more slide or not? If not, that's it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I think next
Thank you, Dwight.
Move to logistic panelist. Yeah. Devin, you want to go ahead and introduce or say a few more words about
Yes.
Jonsson?
Yes. So thank you, Dwight, for that update, and for Jalona to give us some updates from a large and small company perspective. Definitely could understand how having a local partner there in China to help you navigate things. And so both of you have given us some great resources to do that. And I think we'll all be rethinking supply chains and how we procure and how we sell. So that's a great segue into the next groups. So let's hear from the logistics folks and people that are doing business there, some doing business for themselves and some, obviously providing third-party services. So let's hear first from Bob Wilson. He is the president of H.Saga International Port Alliance, Sherry's group. He runs a whole conglomerate of companies that are focused in international trade, logistics, finance, PO finance, and he's got a interesting perspective. So Bob, just introduce.
That want to purchase abroad, but we also support them if they want to sell abroad, taking care of customer service, procurement, delivery in a foreign land, so you don't have to have permanent establishment. We also deal with things like currency exchange, so that you don't have to deal with the volatility in markets. We also have a logistics company, which is a non-vessel owning common carrier, which basically means we ship big containers around the world, and several other support organizations that go with that. As we start moving from the previous speaker into the concept of logistics, we have a few people speaking, but I'm going to stick on the trade topic a little bit as a transitional comment. As we hear the good words that were spoken on by the previous speaker, you recall, we were in the middle of what was referred to as a trade war, and we had a recent successful phase 1 agreement between China and the US. And while that did not benefit too much the importers into the US from a tariff and duty standpoint, it did give a feeling of comfort that the escalation was going to stop. And the timing of that was unique because we then were going into Chinese New Year. So from a procurement from abroad standpoint, people had been holding on to the decision to buy for fear of continued escalation in the tariffs. They need to get the orders on out in order to get them shipped prior to Chinese New Year, only to experience the traditional downtime of manufacturing for Chinese New Year, with the optimistic hope that we would be able to build back up and reorder right after Chinese New Year. And then we had the pandemic, which effectively shut down manufacturing in China. And so therefore we had another event that was creating what is clearly a seesaw of demand, both from the manufacturing side, but that then is affecting the logistics side. You go 2 weeks thinking that you're about to ramp on up and you're worrying about procuring space. Your decisions on forecasting and buying of space are based upon, oh, it's going to be tight, only to find out that we have a glut of supply now. It's not tight at all. So all that to say, it's created a very cloudy crystal ball for those of us working on the logistics side of the business, as well as what's going on the trading side. Then there was an added degree of complication that has come. And this is the first thing that I'd like to kind of speak to is PPE orders, personal protective equipment. We've all spent a great deal of time seeing on the news the scarcity of what we have here in the United States and what is versus what is needed. Now, a fair amount of these products are manufactured in China. What has happened is it seems like everybody and their brother and their uncle have decided that they now can sell masks. And I want to put out some cautionary words here, and I'm going to follow up and repeat what was said by the previous speaker. There are products that are finding their way into the United States that are not quality products, that do not meet the regulations of FDA. And beyond the fact that it can cause harm to the heroes that are out there in the medical world right now, it is also creating supply chain challenges. Because getting in medical supplies from a foreign land into the US does require a fair amount of regulation from a logistics side, particularly as it relates to customs. And the good workers of the FDA and CBD are now holding many of these items in customs, inspecting them to ensure that they are in fact quality goods that can be sent on out to the medical industry. What this does is it creates a cog wheel. So what used to take an average of 2 to 3 days to clear customs and get those last miles on out to our customers now are lasting 5 or 7 days once they get into customs, because we now need to pull apart those who are qualified suppliers, qualified shippers, and qualified distributors from those that are not. So the first thing I would say is if you're for whether it be a philanthropic reason or an opportunistic reason, thinking now is the time to start selling N95 masks, my counsel is please don't. If you aren't in this industry and you don't understand how it works, please don't add to the cogs in the wheel. You know, this is causing challenges, and that's impacting our ability to get the supply on out. Also, I will tell you, there's a huge degree of risk. I'm seeing a lot of money lost by people who are advancing funds against manufacturing a product that is not going to meet the standards in the United States, and they're having a very hard time getting that money back. So I would say my first thing is, for those who are the entrepreneurs and who are thinking about going into PPE, for whatever your reasoning is, be extremely cautious. Work closely with people who have done this before. See if there's ways that you can be assisting without finding new manufacturing in Asia right now. There's plenty of people who are working with our friends in China to get good quality product out, and let's leave it to the professionals. So that's my first comment. Getting back to the same thing I was mentioning about the seesaw of supply and demand and that very cloudy crystal ball, another major event that was happening during the season is the implementation of LSS, which LSS is low sulfur surcharge as it relates to fuel, which required retrofitting and scrubbing of the engines, the vessels that carry these containers. Well, this year there were going to be higher fees for operating off of LSS. Those fees were being passed on to the consumer. Well, now they were based off of the price of oil. And with the price of oil going down so significantly, now that differentiation between people who can ship on scrubbed vessels that are LSS capable versus not has been reduced, which means now we've got an interesting scenario where there's a high potential of, again, a glut of supplies of vessels. So the seesaw effect is very interesting. What does that mean for us as consumers or other business people trying to acquire logistics? I would tell you a couple quick things, and then I'll turn it on over to David, who can give you some great examples about how this is happening and how panic is affecting. But my counsel to you would be this: as it relates to your contract pricing, because this is the exact season when your annual contract pricing is normally negotiated with logistics companies, be extremely cautious. This is a great time to review your legal contracts, have a professional do it, thinking of things like acts of God and the possibility that this market will continue to seesaw, and the agreements that you're going into now may be either hugely disadvantaged to you 2 or 3 months from now, or could be such a win for you that it'll hurt your manufacturers or your suppliers, and they won't want to honor them. So I would encourage you to think about interim steps before negotiating long-term agreements, and then also review those things about force majeure, acts of God. Those are going to be extremely important things to look at. I've spoken a great deal already. David, can you take it from here as it talks about codependency and the next steps?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Devin, I'll kind of dovetail in on the logistics side of things and really kind of build on what's been said so far. Just trying to avoid being redundant for sake of time here, but I really think, just really quick, I'm speaking from the perspective of a global freight forwarder and an NVOCC, and generally just being a middleman in the supply chain puzzle. So we have offices in both Asia and in the United States. So we've been somewhat immersed in this ripple effect really since late January when China began observing the Chinese New Year holiday. So we've kind of been living and breathing it for several months now, probably about a quarter. And I'm president of the Memphis World Trade Club, so appreciate Tennessee China for bringing this forum to Memphis. You know, it's a building block conversation. They had it in Knoxville, and you guys had it in Nashville, and I'm glad to see it move west into Tennessee and the Mid-South. But really quick, just kind of moving on for a couple points I wanted to cover today. You know, there's a lot of codependency in the supply chain, and each component is required independently and to behave and be successful in a certain way, and I'd say that's being extremely disrupted right now. The one thing that just absolutely has to be avoided right now is just widespread panic, and I think it really leads to a lot of poor decision making downstream, and even if it's not a poor decision, just really impactful. So I just wanted to kind of hit a couple examples here on that point. So I've heard it a couple times, the previous, Bob and previous speaker. I think, an example of force majeure being declared by a couple major players in the logistics market, DHL and Viva Logistics. You're seeing a real precautionary methodology in some of the decisions being made to protect contracts, to protect volume commitments from air and ocean freight, and really seeing a lot of different extreme measures being taken right now. So, but in the same breath, moves like that could really damage customer relationships long term. So, I understand the perspective of looking through the lens of risk mitigation, but I think, as a small, medium provider, we got to be real careful in terms of how extreme we go with the measures we take. So, the big guys can do it. They have extreme shortfall penalties and things like that. They have extreme volume commitment penalties that you have to be cautious about. But just a couple of examples on that front, that if you start seeing people declare force majeure, you really need to look at the fine print in your contract and the language in your contract and your agreements, both from a manufacturer and a service provider standpoint, to kind of see which side you're on if things like that start breaking loose. Another point I wanted to kind of cover is really on the port, ocean port, and really rail ramp side of things. When you start seeing closures, short term and even long term, what is to impact the business. I'm going to use an example. We have a pretty major operation in the Houston market, both trucking, port drayage, and warehousing. So just kind of walk you guys through an example just to kind of show how quick things start and finish. So on March 18th, 9:19 p.m., we got a headline notification from the Port of Houston that both container terminals were closed effective immediately. And that's a very open-ended statement, a very impactful statement. So the next day, even as late as 1:43 p.m., I got a note from one of our partners in Houston that said they are stating, quote unquote, it could be 14 to 15 days closed. And so if at that point you start reacting, what's your long-term strategy to avoid that issue or work around that issue? That's when things start kind of coming unraveled. But the same day at 4:01 p.m., the Journal of Commerce released a headline that said Houston container terminals to reopen after closures 23 hours later. So before it even started, it was over. I think my advice would be make sure your information is very reliable and accurate before making any of your critical supply chain network decisions, especially in regards to any small, medium-sized companies, just because of one-day downtime could really lead to a lot of damaging results. So the good news is just on the port and rail front, on the infrastructure side, we're not seeing any closures outside of that one instance for any ports in which we operate. And I'd say we operate in 95+% of all the major port and rail operations in the United States. And really haven't seen any closures in Asia either. So that's good news. A lot of I'd say definitely a critical component of our supply chain is the physical movement of containers at both ends of the ocean movement and on the end rail and trucking side of things. So that continues to see throughput, and that's good news from our perspective. I think if really kind of moving on, but just using that panic or waited out mentality, I think if you've been in our business long enough, I think Bob kind of mentioned a couple things, but we're accustomed to seeing occasional shutdowns, risks of shutdowns, things like that. I think a lot of it has to do with weather. If it's not weather, it's going to be a labor dispute. And so we generally see the market react in two ways. The first one is panic, and the other one's waited out, to keep it simple. But for those that panic, I think, that's not an encouraged reaction just because of the rather large adjustment period it takes for a transportation network adjustments. And they typically don't get implemented during the crisis. So we generally advise the waited out strategy where you can, unless you have a real definitive period of time where a shutdown is going to occur. So in this case, for the virus, we obviously don't know exactly where this lands, but waiting it out with minor adjustments that are well calculated, I think, is the route to go. So the other kind of item I want to cover just real quick for sake of time, I want to move on, but container imbalance situations, we're seeing imbalance of equipment throughout the United States. And when I'm saying that, I mean empty containers available to go both directions in and out of the United States. So an example, just kind of on the inland side, is Dallas and Memphis recently. We've seen quite a bit of pocketed U.S. exporter struggle to get empty equipment for their export needs on a high volume basis. And so, one day, it's really a day-by-day situation right now, but since a lot of the import activity slowed down coming into the United States for that extended Chinese New Year period of time, that really led to a lot of downstream effect where that inland equipment didn't make it where we're normally expecting it. Dallas, Memphis, a lot of cotton and agriculture moves out of these markets this time of year, especially, have seen a real pocket of shortage for certain steamship lines. On the contrary, on the West Coast, we heard and quite a bit of the opposite, where a lot of the empty equipment, container equipment, was stockpiling with no real expected outcome. We started seeing yards get stacked up with empty equipment, so much so that there really wasn't anywhere for it to go. And really a lot of that was due to a lot of the canceled sailings from the Asia to U.S. trade. And so that being said, you're kind of seeing both sides of the equation. You're seeing a surplus of equipment in the wrong markets, and you're seeing a deficit of equipment in the wrong markets. So I think some of this will inherently work itself out in the next 30 to 60 days, but I think you're seeing situations where, like, an MSC ocean carrier is coming in with an extra vessel or two on the West Coast to relieve some of the surplus of equipment and get it back to the origin side near the factories where a lot of the activity is starting to pick up. So I'll kind of leave it here. One last point is, I think the major issue is, bottom line here, is who's going to ultimately pay for the expense to relocate the equipment. I think that's the big debate right now. Who's going to subsidize it? It's a kind of a finger-pointing game right now. I'm seeing some people make some decisions, but ultimately it's an expense in the supply chain, and I really don't know, who's going to bear the burden of it. Unfortunately, I think a lot of that relies or falls on the asset-based carriers. So a couple quick points. I hope that's valuable, Devin, to the panel, but we're kind of moving on, and hopefully we got some information out to the market. I'll let that go on to Corey now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Underwood, for your very insightful information. Last panelist, Jerry Lauren, and he's the Chief Investment Officer from First Horizon Bank. Let's see, Jerry, are you there? Thank you very much, Mr. Underwood.
Yes, I am.
I think we actually accidentally skipped Corey.
Oh, yes, actually, yeah, I wasn't sure, Corey, actually. I'm sorry, Corey, would you mind just go ahead to give some of the your inside information about maritime security associates, what you're working on, and what's the impact of this virus to the business in Memphis area, especially in your area?
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay on the call? I had audio problems earlier, but I think I cleared up.
There is kind of an echo, Cole.
Okay. I'm on the headset right now, so hopefully it'll get better. Okay.
That's
I've
better.
been having some audio problems this morning, so I apologize. Our company, International Maritime Security Associates, or IMSA, we're based in South Florida, but our operations in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then we also have a part-time office, and we primarily concentrate on providing information, critical information, risk and threat information to vessels at sea, so cargo lines, cruise lines, and large yachts. So we provide information to these vessels in real time through our software platform on everything from port delays and closures, any type of unrest that affects maritime operations, medical epidemics, disease outbreaks, major weather issues, everything on the ocean side, from pirates and migrants to navigation hazards. We also have a part that deals with cybersecurity. So it's really interesting for us. What's happening right now is we're tracking, obviously, the COVID-19 disease outbreak internationally, but we're also tracking all of the port closures, delays, restrictions, quarantines that are happening at different ports around the world that are having an interesting effect on the supply chain. So we look at it a little bit different. David and Robert have a really cool perspective from the import side of it and export and what's happening. But we look at actually how is this being affected in real time. So to David's example with Houston, that was something we saw. It went into our system about the closure, and then as soon as that was mitigated, then that information comes out. So we really try to deal in real-time information so that we provide our clients the best information to make decisions, to be able to say, okay, there's a delay in this port. What's that delay? What's causing? Is it going to affect us? Do we need to slow down? Do we need to look at other alternatives? So with the COVID-19, this has been really interesting because it's affected shipping from a global perspective, but also there's different effects in different ports. When this first started in China, it was interesting for us as we didn't see an immediate effect on the ports until it started to spread fairly rapidly. And then we saw issues in so much where there was official port delays or closures, but there were issues with labor in being able to move containers. So we had delays in a lot of the ports, and when we were looking at vessel tracking, you could see a number of vessels that were stayed in anchorage or offshore trying to get in, and now we've seen that start to clear. It's something we're also looking at the potential of as we track this now in the United States. There are a number of restrictions for people traveling to the United States, but one of the things that we've seen is there's a number of exceptions for the movement of cargo. So we've seen restrictions with people coming into the United States, but that so far hasn't had, or we haven't seen a major effect on cargo operations. However, as this continues to play out, we anticipate seeing delays in ports just because of the potential of labor shortages as this disease hits different areas of the United States. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out and the potential quarantines. One of the things that I think is really interesting that we've seen from the international perspective is it's been almost impossible for shipping companies and cruise lines as well to do crew change outs with crews on board the vessel. These crew members serve so long on a vessel and then they go into a break period off the boat. But right now it's been very difficult because a number of the large ports around the world have had restriction on crew changeouts in these ports. So you're seeing crew members serving a lot of extra time on vessels, and I think we're going to continue to see that. So that's also been a strain on the vessel side of it. So from our perspective, it's really interesting to see from the logistics standpoint how this is having an effect on different parts of the world as the disease peaks in different parts of the world. So it's one of the interesting things that we're tracking. Obviously, there's a number of other things within the platform that we track besides just the COVID-19 and what's happening there. So I appreciate the time and thank you for allowing us to be a part of the panel and give kind of what we think is an interesting perspective on what we're seeing.
Thanks, Corey. We appreciate that. And there's definitely a lot of great information there. I think David had just said that port information and timely information was very critical to manage your flows, manage company flows, to understand what's going on. So the fact that you guys are keeping up with that, getting that information to the carriers who are getting that information to the forwarders is spot on. Also, I heard a great comment from David about renegotiating terms or dealing with, buyers and sellers, ordering services. All that is very critical and ties back to something that Dwight said about knowing when to push and when not to push back. This is a temporary situation, so don't permanently impact relationships that you have with your trading partners and your service providers for a temporary situation. Elizabeth, on the next slide, if you could throw that up just for a quick second. Here are some updates here that the logistics team has provided. We won't go through those today. We will hand this out to anybody who wants it. but just kind of shows the changes and the rapid changes that are happening in the industry and how things can move. The passenger airlines converted to freight only is one thing that hit a customer of mine that's in the Cayman Islands. They cannot get information. I can't get letters out because the passenger planes are not going to the island anymore. So now he needs to move to ACH payments to pay everybody. So it's interesting how this is impacting folks. Moving on to our last panelist real quickly, we're going to introduce Jerry Lorraine, the Chief Investment Officer at First Horizon Bank. And he's going to give us a little bit of update about the markets and things that he's seen out there. Jerry, we'll pass it over to you as we move to the next slide.
Thanks, Devin. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for having me here today. The markets are in a bit of a tailspin at the moment. It's very important, I think, to put this in the context of where we were last year. In 2019, the economy was in pretty good shape. It looked like phase one was getting done. We had a little bit of a recovery, and across the board in every asset class we follow, we saw pretty much record performances. Equities were up 30%, gold was up, fixed income was up, real assets were up. It was just a uniformly good year. And then the virus hit. And basically the reaction was very swift, very strong. It was epic in the sense that we went from a bull market to a bear market in about 3 weeks. Haven't never seen anything like that before, and it was kind of shock and awe, to say the least. If you want to put the next slide up, we'll give you an idea of what the volatility actually looked like on a day-to-day basis. We were having swings of 3%. There we go. We were having swings of 3 and 4 and 5% back to back. Just totally unprecedented. And although you don't see it on this slide, there's something called the fear index. It's the VIX volatility index. It ratcheted up from kind of like low double digits in the low teens all the way up to 80, which had not been seen since 2008 in the great financial crisis. It has remained up there. It's pulled back a little bit to kind of the mid to high 50s. But the idea is that the uncertainty surrounding how long we're going to be closed and how deep the cuts are going to be to the economy is just driving the market pretty much wild. You want to go to the next slide? It's important to think about all the implications of this shutdown. In an effort to try to contain the virus, we've adopted this kind of stay in place. And because this is a consumer-driven economy, that means that 60% of what normally goes on is not going to be going on. We've had shutdowns, we've had travel bans, event cancellations have been very, very stark. And the bottom line is we really don't know how long this contraction is going to last. If you look at the experience in China, call it 2 going on 3 months, they're starting to open it back up again. But, the effect of sheltering in place and staying at home is basically, it's going to succeed in flattening the development curve, which will spare the health system, but it will extend in time the slowdown. And so right now, we're looking at the very least, the end of April, and it certainly looks like it's going to be into May before things start picking up again. The result has been, people are just slashing earnings expectations. They're talking about, maybe a 30% drawdown in GDP in the second quarter, and nobody wants to go out into the third quarter to try to estimate how bad that's going to be. But the upshot of the whole thing is that we're looking at probably the worst March in the history of the Dow. We're looking at the worst quarter in the market performance since the great financial crisis. Do you want to go on to the next slide, please? Okay, just to kind of frame this in terms of which particular industries or sectors are most at risk. Clearly, the transportation industry bookings, let's call it, very hard hit. But where I see it more than any place else is in the hospitality industry. That includes not just food and drink, but also things like hotels, the whole leisure area. These things are just getting totally taken out and whacked. If you look at what's going on in the cruise lines, Not surprisingly, they're shut down, and the stock prices there have declined in excess of 75 or 80%. Don't know how long it takes for that to come back, but you know, it's going to be very, very interesting. Importantly, the reaction on the part of fiscal and monetary policy has been epic. It has been just absolutely tremendous. The Fed, for example, on monetary policy has slashed rates back to zero for Fed funds. They are actively expanding their balance sheet. People talk about quantitative easing. That's when the Fed basically buys government securities to provide liquidity for the system. In the past, they have put dollar amounts on their activity, and they'll say, you know, we'll buy $500 million worth of treasury bills, or we'll buy $750 billion worth of long-dated securities. In this instance, they've said that they have an unlimited amount of purchasing power to assure that the financial plumbing stays running. It's really pretty remarkable. I've never seen anything like that in 42 years of Fed watching. The fiscal policy response has been equally strong. The CARES Act just recently passed to provide $2 trillion in support for the economy while we recover from this. So like I said, the reaction on the part of the capital markets has been swift. The reaction on the part of the politicians has been relatively swift and huge in terms of size. And on monetary policy, you know, it's basically whatever it takes will be provided to make sure that the economy stays functioning. Devin, that's all I really had. I just wanted to give you some real high-level overviews. If questions you wanted me to address, I'd be happy to take now, Devin.
Thanks, Jerry. We appreciate that. Definitely timely information for all of us to know. So while we have about 20, 25 minutes left or so, we'll take a question. There was a few that came in. Let's go back up to the top. We had a question from Matt that asked, when can we expect for life to return to normal? Interestingly enough, the first piece of that was around large sporting events, you know. But, you know, that is part of the American fabric and us spending time together, the energy that we built amongst all of ourselves. So I'd be interested to hear, you know, maybe a little bit from Jerry, maybe a little bit from the logistics and business folks as well, just on when we think things may get back to normal. Jerry, from a market perspective, real quick, maybe 20, 30 seconds, just kind of give us a thought. How long could this drag out? Is this a normalcy in Q4, Q1 2021? Like, what do you think?
Devin, I would tell you it's strictly a function of when the case counts go down. You know, we need to get a vaccine. We need to get some treatment. We need to see the number of new cases dropping off. I don't think you're going to see the market stabilize until those conditions are met.
Great. Dwight, if you're still...
Yeah, from a China perspective, life is not back to normal. We conduct meetings, everybody's wearing face masks, travel's restricted. If you travel inside of China, there's 14-day. And so China being 2 months ahead of the US, I think you need to plan that life will be disrupted for quite a while. And I agree that until the vaccine is there, that's the ultimate solution. But we're in a change behavior.
Dwight, you still with us?
I am. I finished. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any thoughts from the shipping perspective? I know that's kind of a loaded question, you know, because it all kind of underlies between the buyers and sellers of products, but just any notes from that perspective?
Well, difficult questions, and let me tell you why you hear a lot of silence coming from David and I. As I mentioned, we're right in the middle of contract negotiations, which is an interesting poker, right? We all have to have our face as to what we think it is. Here's my general comment, Brianna. As mentioned, generally, if China had 2.5 month head start and life is into normal now, seem reasonable to assume that life will not return to normal for another, say, 3 months. And that will directly impact the United States for sure. So it is fair to assume that we will have a slight surge in items, critical being things like PPE and other components that are some items that are considered real staples. But even as you see seasonal items and purchases, those will remain there. And what this I think is going to create is very of what's referred to as the peak season for retail and shippers. That will happen right on Black Friday. Everyone gets their purchases on in, and the retailers start breaking even. The window of that is going to be very small, so I anticipate a smaller amount of what we would refer to as luxury items available to us, a lower amount of spending, therefore a very short window, what would be the peak on logistics. And during that short window, I think there should be a fair amount of chaos, meaning rollovers of containers, additional congestion at the airports, then a slack earlier than normal prior to Chinese New Year. Said it's very, very close. David, would you agree or amplify anything that?
Yeah, let me come out of video hiding for a second. But I think, yeah, I agree 100%. I think it's going to create some sort of false peak season, or artificial peak season, rather, you know, once things start thawing out more and more. But I mean, we've already started to see quote unquote space shortages in an attempt to kind of right size the ocean vessel marketplace. By that, you know, carriers are pulling vessels from trade lanes, they're idling them, they're not going to operate half full. Nobody's going to do that. It's a bad business move. They're going to lose money. But you know, short term, that's what the solution has been, and that's the new normal. But I don't think we know what normal looks like and when that resumes. But all things are moving forward from a operational and contract season perspective, because you know, people have to sign their agreements, they have to operate under contract, and they have to cover their freight. So I haven't really seen any slowdown in terms of, you know, inking the deals, so to speak, this time of year, which is what we typically see. So yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Thanks, David. Dr. Jonsson, are you still with us?
I am.
Thank you. Dr. Jonsson, this may be a two-part to the question. You know, we want to follow up with the question in the line of thinking that we're going on, because the business aspects are one thing, but then also the people aspect of it is also interested. So as a follow-up to this, I'm going to give you a chance to answer this question, and then maybe related to that, what are you seeing, like, based upon how fastly this thing is still moving and how everybody's trying to combat and contain? Like, is there any indication, I don't put you on the spot, but is there any indication of what you're seeing before we could reasonably kind of lift some of these bans and start being able to move in the communities again?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've watched most of the briefings from Tony Fauci and Birx, and then of course we have our own individual professional opinions. And so what, at least from my opinion, what I see is that each city is going to have its own curve. So I would hope that every city understands and appreciates that. I think we do in Memphis. And that would go to smaller rural areas also. The virus is now everywhere. And so even the smallest, tiniest little town is going to have its curve. And people can, you know, hopefully what I had hoped for Memphis was that we had done this shelter in place soon enough, but in the last 2 days, there's been a doubling of the number of positive people. So if you look in every city and just follow those trends, you're going to see that every city is going to undergo the same absolutely horrible situation now that we are watching with New York, LA, New Orleans. You know, I was traveling, I hate to go on, but you opened the door. I was traveling in Ukraine at the end of January when this, when we finally understood that this virus was there in China. And I was coming through customs and the guys had gloves on. Some guys had no gloves on. Some guys in customs had gloves in their pockets and they were taking them off and on. And I was watching a stream of people from Asia come through and have their products taken out in their suitcases because, you know, they had to look for the oranges and whatever they had, duck tongues, you know, different things that people bring. And I looked at the one guy, the TSA guy, and I said, well, why aren't you wearing your gloves? And he said, it doesn't matter. If I get infected, I get infected. And that was how he was being, you know, that was the communication back in January. It doesn't matter. If I get infected, I get infected. It's not such a big deal. And so at our border, what I call our border protection, there was nothing going on. The second thing I was surprised about, this is through Detroit, is that there was absolutely no one measuring temperature. They were making an assumption that because I was coming in from Ukraine, I was fine. Which is, you know, Ukraine, at that time, there were people from Asia traveling. And so we're really in the worst situation, I think, that we could be had we said, let's start this back in January to make sure it doesn't come to our border. So now it is here, it's everywhere. And without PPE in Memphis, without PPE in the smallest town we can think about, without training on how to use the PPE, without biosafety practices, without an appreciation that the virus will spread and continue to spread, we're facing just unbelievable situation here. And I see it in my own neighborhood. I see people that we've been in sheltering in place in Memphis now for a week. And what that means is that everybody's kids are out playing together. Well, all I see when I see all those kids out there playing together is that if one of them has the virus, they're going to transfer it to the other child, and then that's going to go back home to the parent. That's all I see every day. I see people in the parks congregating, playing. It's wonderful that people are outside, but I don't really think anyone really understands that you do have to be 6 feet away. And so everything we're seeing is just going to be dominoes. I mean, ports closing, Amazon people going on strike. Pretty soon we're going to see the grocery people not want to go in. Why would you? No one's giving you gloves at the grocery store. Why would you want to be a clerk? So, and certainly in Memphis, we're going to face our own shortage of PPE, and we're trying to address that by looking at what can we do here. What's our solution here for disinfection of PPE to maintain the integrity in Memphis and other little cities, other cities across the state, are actual information and help with testing of the PPE as we go through these processes to ensure that the PPE is going to stay in shape. And then there's going to be rules, right, of you know, but it was very disheartening when I heard that 30% of the PPE supply was defective. It was very disheartening. We need every little piece of PPE. So.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Jonsson, I'm glad you brought that up. I do want to ask this follow-up. I will take this time to make a mention of the National Association of Manufacturers and in partnership with the local Tennessee Manufacturing Association and Tennessee Chamber, has a call to action out right now for any manufacturing company that has capacity in its location to manufacture PPE, and they're asking for everybody to share with them. And if you need a conduit to get to them, you can reach out to me. We're on that board as well to say what you or your companies or your clients or members that are in manufacturing that can make some of those things. Make sure reach out to me if nothing else, and I'll connect you with those resources. But they want to know what everybody can make, because we do, we love American-made products anyway. We'll buy them from wherever they come from if they're real and authentic. But if we can create opportunities for American jobs to manufacture those things, we will. But Dr. Jonsson, if you could just take like maybe 1 or 2 minutes as a follow-up to that, and tell us, what does it take to actually create a vaccine, right? I would imagine once you understand the genetics and the molecules of the pathogen that you're looking at, you have to find what will combat that. But then it may lead to how long it takes us to get over this based upon when we can actually develop a vaccine or a medicine or medical procedure that can counterbalance it. So I'm sure there's a few trials or something that it takes to get to that, but if you could take like a minute or so and just maybe explain that process to us.
Yeah. Well, the process that the 2 vaccine candidates are in right now is called a phase 1. And so in a phase 1, you take a small number of people and test to see if there's any adverse effects in the population from that vaccine. And so one has, volunteers that you are study participants that you consent and then follow very closely to make sure that there aren't any adverse events. And that's what Fauci has been talking about when he says, publicly, well, what about the chloroquine, right? Can't we just take it off the shelf and use it? And one can have hope and say, oh, that looks promising. But even for that compound, we would want to see that at the dose that's needed for alleviating virus symptoms, that it doesn't have any toxicity or adverse effects in people with underlying conditions. And so all of that has to be checked out before one uses it, because if you use it, then you're risking. As with the AIDS epidemic, what they were able to do was fast track drugs to be tested in individuals who there was some risk with the drug, but the individuals were willing to take the drug because they were at the end stage of life, right? And so I think we're going to see some of that some drugs are going to be fast tracked and used in our worst case scenario patient population. So anyway, after you get through and you say, okay, this product looks like it has a good safety profile in your phase 1 and 2, then you actually would test this in populations. And so if it's a vaccine, then it's a prophylactic. It's going to protect people. It takes time for vaccines to elicit immunity. So what a vaccine does is once that you have it injected, it is going to essentially tickle your immune response. So we have a response in our bodies called antibodies, and it's going to upregulate that to respond to that particular target. And so when they go into people, what they want to see is that these antibodies to that virus increase, and as they increase, that's correlated with protection in a particular community. And so you have to do this on a fairly large scale so that you can actually show that a particular community has a lower incidence than another community, right? So you'd have to take 2 cities and show that there's a reduced incidence, or something. I don't design vaccine trials, so that's a whole other ballgame of expertise, but that's my general impression, is that you want to test that it actually does reduce efficacy, reduce infection.
Thanks, Dr. Jonsson. We've had some great questions. We'll try to hit one or two more. I see one asking, will the presentation be available after? Most definitely, we will get this out. We will also send out some notes on our speakers and panelists, their contact information as well. We'll get that out and a couple of key takeaways. One question, how far will this COVID-19 damage the retail market? Jerry, if you could give us a quick one minute answer or something on that, and then maybe even to our company representatives, just real quickly before we close out.
I would defer to Jalona on that one. The retail markets are absolutely getting hammered, but my view of it is from kind of a Wall Street remove. I can tell you that the retailers' stocks are down pretty dramatically. But then on the individual level, I mean, think about how much shopping have you done lately? Have you been going out and going to the stores? I suspect not.
No comment.
Online might survive a little bit, but I think the bricks and mortars guys are really suffering.
It's been interesting. We supply quite a few companies recently bought by private equity companies. When those acquisitions or mergers were done with debt financing, sort of tier 2 debt financing, a little bit higher interest rates, they're having cash flow debt problems right now. That is affecting orders. So I think the supply challenges are going to grow in the next weeks and months ahead.
I'll echo that point. I have a customer who imports from China and Asia, sells to local retailers, retail stores, and as well as retail product providers. And they're not usually a borrowing type of customer, but it's been mentioned that may come about in the next couple of months as the large retailers start to stretch the next supplier, the tier 1, then the tier 2, then the tier 3. So those are probably some things that we're going to see. Luckily, the government has stepped forward to help out in that regard. We've only got a few minutes left, and so we thank everybody for joining. But before we kind of close out, and we'll maybe hear from Elizabeth and from some of the other facilitators. If Lulu has made it, we'll try to hear from her. But Dr. Kung, definitely thank you for joining us and moderating with us. Give you a minute or so just to kind of tell us about the Confucius Institute, and then we'll pass it over to Elizabeth. You're on mute. Can you unmute?
Okay, thank you very much, Devin and Elizabeth, and also Lulu for putting this workshop together, and also thank to all the panelists and also the participants. I personally have learned quite a bit from all of you, and I know it is a very challenging time for all of us to work together, and hopefully this pandemic will go away very soon. Yeah, I'm with the Confucius Institute, and we have been here for almost 12, 13 years. And we simply want to be the facilitator to help the Tennessee economy to grow, as well as to see whether we can really work together with the Chinese and Chinese government, and to help Tennessee and help the people actually in China and also in Tennessee and in the United States. And I know I saw the comment. If you want to get all this information, I know Devin Buford really knows all the panelists very well, and maybe you can reach Devin or maybe Elizabeth to acquire the information on the PowerPoint and also from the speakers. And I want to thank all of you for participating, and we really are all together, and I know this storm and this pandemic hopefully will go away soon if we all understand, and also work together well. Thank you.
Close out, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Dr. Kung and Devin and everybody. I wanted to thank our event partners again. Also, if you enjoyed this event, please become a member of Tennessee China Network. We have individual, small business, corporate, and higher level memberships with a variety of benefits. This event was free as a public service, and we hope that you'll become a member to help support future events like this. I think Lulu is on with us now, and I'd like to pass it over to her to just say a couple words and also tell you about our event survey that she'll be sending out. Lulu? I'm not sure if Lulu is hearing me. Okay, it sounds like maybe this. Thank you for all the people that have shared resources in the chat. If you haven't checked out the chat, a variety of people had put links to various resources, and so I encourage you to check that out as well. And you can contact me at roland@tnchinanetwork.org, Lulu at Lulu, L-U-L-U, Copeland, C-O-P-E-L-A-N-D @tnchinanetwork.org for any follow-up. We can also connect you with Devin and the others. Thank you again. And Stephanie, Devin, any closing remarks?
Oh, well, this is
No, ma'am.
Stephanie. And that the recording will be available in 30 minutes after the shared.
So we couldn't do this without you. And stay safe and healthy, and stay tuned to the Tennessee China Network e-newsletter for more information as we continue through this crisis. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Take care,
All of you.
everybody.